All right, so we are taking a look here at the Ten Commandments. The first commandment is all about having no other gods before him, no engraven images, no idols. Second one is all about God and his name, treating his name as something that we revere and something that we don't misuse. And then as well, now we are in the third commandment. Now the third commandment simply says this. It simply says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. So we are to remember the Sabbath by keeping it holy. Now we're going to unpack that and we're going to talk about really all these things, what it looks like to remember, what it looks like to have a Sabbath and what that means. And also we're going to talk about how to keep it holy. Now I got to say this about the Ten Commandments. A lot of people look at the Ten Commandments and certainly people who aren't Christians, but also some who are Christians, and they'll look at it and they'll think, man, that's just a bunch of rules. And it's almost like, man, I get to go out and have so much fun. Oh, but you know what? Darn it. We're supposed to have the Ten Commandments, and that's just going to suck the life, and that's going to suck the joy out of me. And no, actually, that's wrong. See, Jesus said that he has come to give us life, and life to its fullest. In other words, what God is saying here with the commandments is that since he has created everything, this is the best way to live. And it's a gift. And sometimes the Ten Commandments are hard to see it that way, but it is. It's absolutely a gift. It's not restrictive. It's freeing, because what it does is that if we live God's way, the way that he has set it up, the way that he has commanded us to live, our lives are going to be so much more blessed. And as a result, it's going to be so much simpler. We're not going to see sin whenever we go outside of God's boundaries and we commit a sin. Then what happens is it really complicates our life. We have to deal with those consequences for sin. And so what's so great about the Ten Commandments is that God knows what he's doing when he set all this up, and he's commanding us. And so the third commandment is all about how a way that we can actually experience rest in our lives, about how we can prevent ourselves from getting burnt out, which is a really big deal. I'm sure that in your life, especially with school and whenever there's a test due the next day or something, and it's only going to get worse whenever you get into college and get into the workforce, that there's such a thing as burnout. And you can experience so much stress. And if it's just one day of stress, then it just means that you've had a hard day. But what if you were really stressed for not just a day, but for a whole week? Imagine how tired you're going to be by the end of that week. Or what if you're really stressed for a whole month or a year or 5 years or 10 years? And whenever someone is habitually put on so much stress and they are just constantly working, they're just constantly running, and they're not able to rest, what happens is our body literally starts to shut itself down, and then we just burn out. And whenever I say burnout, I mean it's a real thing. People can end up in the hospital, not only through such a thing as a heart attack or a stroke that could be induced through stress, but literally just they diagnose it as burnout, because our body is not meant to go 24/7 for years on end without any sort of rest, without any sort of time that they are spending while they're resting to connect to God as well, or connect to their family or friends. And so if we're just go, even though that's glamorized in our culture, we think of the CEO who has the corner office in the high rise, or we think of people who are just constantly posting stuff on Snapchat or Instagram. What we think of is man, they're a go-getter. Man, they're a hard worker. And you should work hard. But also, God talks about this commandment of a Sabbath. And really, it's God's way of living, where we actually have one day a week that we commit to being a Sabbath. So let's talk about this commandment. So whenever we talk about a Sabbath, it is kind of an odd word. We don't use it a lot outside of church. But a Sabbath simply means a day of rest. A day of rest. In other words, this is God's gift to you. It is a way that God is giving you an opportunity, a commandment, but an opportunity once a week to rest, to pause, take time out of the ordinary, and to rest. Certainly we experience this with God modeled this for us. So after he created the earth in 6 days, on the seventh day, he rested. Not because he was winded, not because he was really tired, although it is crazy to think that he created everything in 6 days, but he rested to give us this model to show us of resting on the seventh day, on the Sabbath. And so the Sabbath is for you. Jesus even says this. He says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And so one of the problems that the Pharisees, the religious leaders of Jesus' day, did was because they were so committed to this commandment, which I actually admire. I feel like a lot of Christians don't admire this enough. But they don't commit to it enough. So the Pharisees were very committed to doing the Sabbath, but they got carried away by their own rules and regulations around the Sabbath. So if we are not supposed to work on the Sabbath, the question is, what is work? Like, is going grocery shopping considered to be work? Is cooking work? And so they created all these rules and external man-made rules and regulations around it in a hopes then of not actually breaking the commandment. Again, I admire the intention, but they just got carried away with their own rules. And what happened was Jesus actually healed someone on the Sabbath. Praise be to God that Jesus healed someone. But they didn't look at it that way. Rather than celebrating, wow, Jesus healed someone, they condemned Jesus because they said he is doing work on the Sabbath. And Jesus says that it is okay to do good on the Sabbath. So if you go help someone in need on the Sabbath, guess what? That's great. If you go serve in the coffee house, that's work on the Sabbath. The church coffee house, that's good because Jesus says it's okay to do good on the Sabbath. And then he also says that Sabbath was made for man. It is made for you. It is a gift to you. So the question, of course, is, well, when is the Sabbath? And the short answer is, it is any day of the week. It is any day of the week. So back in Jesus' day, and certainly in the Old Testament, what we found was the Hebrew calendar, and actually it is still our calendar today that we have, is the first day of the week begins on Sunday. So if ever you look at a calendar either on your phone or a paper calendar, you'll look to the far left, you'll always see Sunday as the first day of the week. And then the seventh day of the week, so the last day of the week, is Saturday. And so Jewish people back then and Jewish people today even practice this. And you'll see that on Friday night, because that's when it begins. It begins at sunset on Friday night through sunset of Saturday, that is the Sabbath. Now, for Christians, however, many Christians started meeting for worship on Sunday. And the reason for that was twofold. One is because Jesus rose from the grave on Sunday, and a lot of Christians wanted to celebrate that. And the second reason was kind of a logistical reason, because the synagogues were usually filled on Saturday, but was completely empty on Sunday. And so for Christians who wanted a place to worship, would often do it then on Sunday because it was a place that it was a good time. It was empty. And so again, since the Sabbath is made for you, it really is any day of the week. So it could be Saturday, it could be Sunday, it could be Wednesday, it could be whenever. But God says that we are to do it, we're to remember it and keep it holy, but he does not tell us exactly when it should be. In fact, Paul actually does say this. He says this in Romans. He says, one person esteems one day as better than another. So again, some people are saying that, well, it's supposed to be on Saturday rather than Sunday or Tuesday, not Friday or whenever, while another esteems all days alike. Each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. The one who observes the day observes it in the honor of the Lord. In other words, it doesn't matter when it is, as long as you do it, as long as that you honor it and for the honor of the Lord. So let's talk just for a little bit on how to keep it holy, And the first one here is we are to use this day to rest my body. Let's rest our body, physical rest, because after all, we work hard, we're going. And the way that God has made our bodies is that our bodies need rest. And so the Sabbath is a whole day of rest. So if we look at, this is from the commandment. This is from Exodus chapter 20 here. And here's what it says. It says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or female servant, your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. So in other words, God is commanding us here to rest. We're not to do any work. We are to physically stop, take a whole day to recharge, to rest our bodies. But the Sabbath is not just a physical rest. Yes, you should take a nap. That's great. Maybe you don't do certain things that you normally would do throughout the week. That's great. But also, it is a way of recharging our emotions. So that's the second point here, is to recharge my emotions. Recharge my emotions. And this is to emotionally prepare you for going back into the week. And so you can include time for a few things. One is for quietness. Quietness. You know, I got to tell you that we live in a world where there's just noise all the time. And we're the ones who are creating the noise. In fact, silence sometimes is weird. Sometimes silence is really uncomfortable. Let me give you an example. It's weird, right? Silence is weird. Here's my point, is that we are constantly on the go. We're constantly doing something on our phone. We have the TV going. We have the Alexa speaker going. We have noise. And you know what? Really what we need is to break away from that just for a little bit and spend time with God in quietness. I could also tell you that we did a video shoot one time in my neighborhood, and it was just simply on a Saturday afternoon. And so we had a condenser boom mic. And the problem with these condenser microphones is that they pick up everything. I mean, it's crazy. And all we needed was just a little bit of silence to do a dialogue shot. And it took us forever, because there's always that guy who has the Harley who drives by. There's always an airplane somewhere in the sky that's making a bunch of noise. Apparently all my neighbors own table saws and were sawing in their garage. We even had a truck that was a delivery truck that parked right next to us. It was going chugga, 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 chugga. And I just was pulling my hair out just thinking, I just need a couple minutes of quiet. And because we live in a world where things are just noise, and we're constantly on the go, take some time for quietness. In fact, the Psalms here say this. He says, He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. And so just the still waters, the calmness of it all, is actually going to help recharge our emotions. Now, the second thing to do here is to include time for family. Ecclesiastes even says this: enjoy life with the wife whom you love. In other words, God is blessing us, saying, you know what, go spend some time with your family. Go do something fun. You know, the Sabbath day doesn't have to be the day of just vegging out on the couch, although that's not a bad idea. All right, but it's more than that. It's to go and actually bond with your family, actually have fun with them. Go do something fun. And by the way, kids, you can go tell your parents, hey, you know what? According to the Bible, we're supposed to go and do something fun as a family. So on our Sabbath, let's go do something. And you can pick that and you can go for it. And that's a good, healthy thing to do. Don't just miss out on this, though. Especially as teenagers, we don't want to be around our parents. We don't think they're cool anymore or something. No, go spend time with them. And then the third way here is include time for fellowship. Fellowship's kind of a fancy word of saying hang out with your friends. Go do something fun with your friends as well. Hebrews 10 talks about this. He says, let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So in other words, what Hebrews is talking about here is this idea of having fellowship with other Christians, people in our lives who we enjoy hanging out with, who we enjoy spending time with, some friends, but who are Christians. See, not just friends, but Christian friends, because they are the ones who are going to be able to encourage you and support you as you go through life. I got to tell you that if you're going to go into battle, would you rather go in by yourself with just one sword and you? Or would you rather go in with a whole army? Guess what? Satan is very powerful in our world, and he's unfortunately very influential in our lives. He wants to tempt us. There is such a thing, the Bible calls this spiritual warfare. So if you're going to go in and fight, are you going to go in by yourself as you, yourself, and you? Or would you rather go in linked arms with a Christian community that can support you and uphold you? I can tell you that the times when I've gone through a really difficult time, the people who have invested in me, the people who have poured into my lives, I can give them a call and they'll answer the phone. Or I can show up at their house and we'll sit down together and talk and pray. And guess what? They can actually encourage me. They can build me up. That is the value of having Christian friends. That is the value of fellowship. And so fellowship is not just spending time with friends, but it's receiving that encouragement. And you can receive it just on your own by texting. It could be things like youth group. It could be things like going to church especially. And really, that's what it is. We're going to actually now finish with our third point here, which is the most important thing to do on a Sabbath. So I've even spent a lot of time talking about physical rest and recharging your emotions. But really, the whole point of a Sabbath here is to refocus your spirit. Refocus my spirit. See, a lot of people spend time on the couch on a Sunday. Some more than others, all right? A lot of people spend time with their family, and those are all good things. But really, the most important thing for a Sabbath is to spend time with God, to connect with your Maker. And I say this not out of a guilt trip, all right? But I say it because it is for you. It is good for you. Remember, the Sabbath was made for you. The Sabbath is a time when we shut out everything that's going on in our lives. And we go to God in worship, in prayer, in reading His Word. Now, we should be reading His Word every day. But what it is, this is now a time where we get to set aside a whole day where we get to focus on God, where we get to connect with Him, reconnect. We get to be filled up. We get to be forgiven of our sins. We get to be encouraged. Guys, there is so much value in what happens in a worship service. A lot of people will often look at church and say, I guess I can go, or maybe I don't really feel like it today. It always cracks me up whenever people don't take this commandment seriously. I mean, this is one of God's top 10 things, guys. And it's amazing at how many Christians will wake up on a Sunday and say, oh, you know what? It's too cold outside. Or they'll say, it's too hot outside. Or maybe they'll even say this. They'll say, it's too nice outside, so I'm just going to go on a hike instead. I've heard all of those things, guys. I've heard that it's raining, that it's too sunny, that my ex-girlfriend's going to be there, so I can't go. I've heard the craziest excuses that people give for why they cannot be in worship. Now, guys, I will say this. If you're sick, stay at home. All right, we don't need whatever illness that you're bringing to the table here. You can stay at home if you're sick. And also, we're going to be at a place where we're going to be live streaming. And so you can still worship God from at home. But that's only if you're sick or if you're on vacation, right? And by the way, whenever you're on vacation, did you know that wherever you're at, even if you go to vacation in Hawaii, did you know there's churches in Hawaii? Oh, yeah, there are. You can totally go to church in Hawaii, absolutely. Or you can catch a live stream. So there's still ways that you can connect to God on a Sabbath, even if you're sick or even if you're on vacation. But those are exceptions. Most people are not sick and most people are not on vacation. And it's just crazy how people sometimes will completely disobey God on this commandment. How they'll look at God and say, God, I know that you've said that I'm supposed to worship you, but I just don't want to. I'd rather do my own thing. And that's a really dangerous place to be, where your heart is at a place where you look at God and say, God, I don't want to. And so I give you all these things here. Sabbath is about resting your body. It's about recharging your emotions. Most importantly, though, it's a way to connect to God, to worship Him, receive forgiveness, receive communion, receive His word. Every worship service, even if the sermon's really bad, even if the music's really bad, God still can work through all that and teach you something very, very, very important. So I give you all these things that we are to remember the Sabbath. And not just like, oh yeah, the Sabbath, but like to do it and to keep it holy.